The business of college football is ruining the sport for some. It's not ruining the sport for me, but I do understand the sentiment, and I really wanted to speak to this because we have some news to peg this emotion to. One of the things that I have encountered in doing this job for the last few years is just how people feel about players getting paid name, image, and likeness money. The short background on this is the NCAA had prohibited players from making money from their name, image, and likeness. It has since backed off of that because, well, it's illegal. And because it's illegal, they're about to pay what looks like about $2 billion in relief to some players over the past decade for limiting their use of making money for their name, image, and likeness. We also have seen a rise in GPAs from players. We've seen all-time highs set by football programs because with the Alston Award, which is one of the consequences, or I should say outcomes, from name, image, and likeness becoming above board, you can pay players for going to school and having good grades. No different than the parents that pay their kids for bringing home A's on report cards. Where I think this is rubbing people is the money is big. The money is large in some areas. In others, it's not really that big a deal, but it can be. And if you root for a big-time college football program, it probably is a lot of money for a handful of players, between 5 and 7 figures depending on who you are and what position you play and what the need is. Where this is really beginning to upset people in college football is it looks a lot like the NFL, and many people believe that they love college football because it is not the NFL, because they feel that there's this purity about it, some amateurism, as we used to call it, where you're playing for the education and the opportunity to make money down the line as opposed to making money right now and the education. It feels unfair to some. It also feels like it's messing up what was an otherwise fine sport for others. One of the big consequences of moves like this is realignment, which has basically been going on since 1984 when Oklahoma and Georgia sued NCAA for the rights to have their games posted on national television with who they want, the creation of the Big 12 Conference, the dissolution of the Pac-12 Conference, which not really dissolute, but for our purposes, they don't play for a championship, they don't have a league. The ballooning of the Big Ten, which is paying $1 billion to its programs. The ballooning of the SEC, which is the most popular league in all of college football. The ballooning of the ACC, which is trying to keep its grip on its Power 4 status. The ballooning of the Big 12, which is also trying to keep its grip on its Power 4 status while also servicing the other sports. Football alone does what football does. And then you have to talk about what men's basketball may or may not do for your program, depending on how good you are. Kansas's men's basketball program does more for it than TU's men's basketball program, for instance. And then we're talking about Title IX, which is really where this is going to get hairy and where you're going to have to be very, very careful because Title IX doesn't just go away because we're upending the way we talk about the money. But I think there are two clear examples of how this is manifesting going into this football season. A, we learned that Courtney Morgan, general manager for the Alabama Crimson Tide, received a salary increase of $825,000 annually, up from $500,000 annually, to be Alabama's general manager. He came over with Kalen DeBoer's from Washington as they'd helped build a team that finished national title runner-up and won the Pac-12 championship. He also is getting this sort of raise because his skill set was desired elsewhere. There is a credible report that USC tried to hire him away for the same job. He chose to stay at Alabama. They chose to make him whole because of it. You're going to see more of that all over the sport. And a phrase that I think is really going to make some people's skin crawl, which is college football front office figure. You didn't have college football front office figures until relatively recently. As a matter of fact, the college football front office used to be this thing that was called the athletic department. Now the athletic department is the center of a wheel that spins, and it's got spokes that are name, image, and likeness collectives and marketing. It's got football. It's got its broadcast partners and how that relationship is managed. And inside of that, you have front office figures specifically for football. And frankly, not a whole hell of a lot of other sports. Front office figure, the guy that used to be your general manager was your director of football operations. That guy's job has now both expanded and narrowed. You have directors of player personnel. You have directors of scouting. You have directors of transfer portal. You have a support staff that has grown to be so large that we have had to say, hey, you can have 10 on the field coaches. That's it. But now we may be rolling back what that is. No, excuse me. We are rolling back what that is. Who can work out with what player and how? What is the role of an analyst, any analyst on a football team? Used to be a way for Nick Saban to get a really great coach into his building who was still being paid by the last university that fired him and needs to pay him out. So they pay him $25,000 and he'd be still making his money from, say, if you are Gary Patterson, Texas Christian, right? Which actually happened at Texas and not at Alabama. But that's the point, right? The point is you're going to see more stories like Courtney Morgan. And it reminds me the first time that we learned about $1 million head coach in college football, which is about 30 years ago. And the money that Nick Saban took, a whopping $1 million, to come to LSU from Michigan State at the turn of the century, and how that is chump change now. If you are a top 10 head coach, you're probably going to make close to $8, $9, $10 million. And that's your salary. That's not whatever endorsement you might have or whatever other side hustle you might have, whether it's a dealership or a restaurant or investments, whatever that might bring to you. Now you're seeing this money funnel not just from the players, but to the guys that identify the players, which makes it feel a lot more like a front office in an NFL club. And as much as I know people do not like it, you want this to hurry up and get done, because then you are going to get to a place where there are regulations that feel necessary and not antiquated that need to be reinforced. Brings me to the next part of this conversation. Mike Gundy has always been a really great quote. And right now, he just wants to play football. He knows what kind of program he has. He knows the kind of talent he has in this program. He knows what he's got in Ollie Gordon, Alan Bowman, Rashad Owens, Brennan Presley, Nick Martin, Kendall Daniels. He knows the staff. He knows they're good. And he's told anybody that is listening, tell your agent, stop calling me. We're playing football now. We're not negotiating. We're done negotiating about money. Because what usually happens is an NIL collective handles the negotiations, but they have a purse for which they will go to the head coach and go, this is what we got. Who do you want to spend it on? And that comes into a back and forth between the collective and the player and their agent and the coach until they settle on a figure in most cases, many cases, not all cases. I think it's telling that Mike Gundy has gone, we need to hurry up and get this thing done because this is ridiculous, because you don't actually have a contract to employ a football player. You have a marketing deal. And that's a problem. That's a problem, because we need to identify who is playing football for money and who is playing football for scholarship, or who is playing football for both. And as you're going to see the rosters change and reduce, probably, you're going to see the cost of fielding a great football go up, because now that we are going to see the money go up, you're also probably going to see a little bit more transparency, meaning how much people are getting paid and who they're getting paid by. One of the cool things about the NFL that I'm sure that they would like to stop is that we know what everybody's getting paid. We can track it. We understand the collective bargaining agreement. We can decipher it ourselves. We can understand why contract negotiations are holding up. We can understand why CeeDee Lamb is holding out, right? We can understand why you might trade Justin Fields to Pittsburgh so you can go draft Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. That's what's happening in college football. You're going to continue to see the sport evolve into this. And I'm going to point to this Courtney Morgan moment as the one for which we're going to look at the rest of these front offices in another 5 to 6, 10 years, and you're going to see a whole bunch of guys running them making a cool $1 million, and guys beneath them making $325, $225, $100 to do a job that you used to do for graduate level stipend.